What's up, everybody? Harley Pettit here with Bella's Bombers, here to do the first ever installment of Bomber Review. This is the Simon Line time lapse. I got my hands on one. Now let's talk about it. I took it out to the field today to throw it against the Warbird, which is the Lone Star Discs 12 speed that is also a 5 to 6 glide, negative 1.3, and it fills this slot in my bag. So we're going to talk about it, compare it, contrast it, watch them fly a little bit, and tell y'all what I think. We'll start out with hand feel. I would say the Simon Line time lapse feels a little narrower in my hand. I don't know if it's actually any narrower. It might just be ever so slightly more beveled, a little bit more domey maybe. But in my hand, it feels like the Warbird is ever so slightly wider. It just digs into the meat of my hand a little more, holding it with the same power grip. It's definitely not a negative thing though for it to take up a little bit less space in my hand. I've always liked a wide disc, but it's not that big of a difference, so I probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference honestly if I wasn't like thinking about it. But let's talk about flight a little bit. I would say they are very similar except for on one angle. If you throw both of them on hyzer, you're going to get a low flat hyzer that's going to be moving on that hyzer angle the whole way, hit the ground, skip a few times, and be that trusty overstable finish you were after. Throwing it flat out of the hand, which for me is still on about 5-10 degrees of hyzer, but I'm only human, it carries a little bit further before dumping out and still skipping. When you get to throwing flex shots with them is when I notice the difference, which that should be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt because this is out of my bag. I throw it all the time. I've hit a couple trees with it, so it's beat in a little. Whereas the Simon Line is brand new off the shelf, but when I threw the Simon Line pretty hard on an anhyzer angle, it would drift ever so slightly to the right, but never really flip. It would just drift a little bit, get to flat, and then dump hard left. Whereas the Warbird would carry a little bit further to the right, actually turn a little bit to that right edge before dumping out to the left, and it got about 40 feet extra distance over the Simon Line disc on the flex lines. But other than that, thrown flat or on hyzer, these discs were just neck and neck. I got some video here to demonstrate that. Let's get me up out of the way. This first shot is the Simon Line disc on just a pure hyzer. Comes out of the hand, starts drifting to the left, hits the ground and skips just a little bit. Here is the Warbird on a similar angle. I did release it a little bit early, so you'll see it finishes more left, but it comes out similar height, has a little bit of lift in the wind, but just drifts left, comes down over here. Those discs were neck and neck. I range finded both of them back to the tee box, and they were like 370 and like 372 back to when I set my bag up at the end of the tee box. And they were about 30 feet apart width-wise, but they were both the same distance from the tee. Like, it was very similar shots when it came to the flat shots and the hyzer shots. You'll see after this hyzer, I wanted to throw back at the camera so you could see a little bit of the finish and ground play of the disc. You can see it just finishes hard and overstable, and off camera it probably got a 20-foot flare skip. But this is the Simon Line disc thrown a little bit flatter, still on a little bit of hyzer because that's my natural release, but it goes straight toward those light pole right here, but it still just dumps hard, and it gets a little bit more of a flare skip because it didn't hit the angle. The angle hitting the ground wasn't quite as sharp. I seem to not have put the video in throwing the Warbird flat, but it was right on top of it. Here it is on a little bit of a flex line. You can see it drift slowly to the right before it gets lost in the clouds, and you'll see it come down hard over here. And then here is a Warbird on a flex line. It's going to get lost in the clouds a little faster, but it flipped up, rode to the right a little bit, and it'll actually dump kind of middle of the fairway right over here. And it went about 40 feet further than the Simon Line did that finished over here. And then I tried a couple more flex shots with the Simon Line. This one's going to come out a little bit early, but with more anhyzer angle out of my hand. You can see that as it disappears over here, but then it's going to come out over here, and it just dumped out immediately. It never quite got past flat. It just stayed there and then dumped hard left. This is just a little example video I made showing y'all where I put my bag on the end and took my rangefinder out and was rangefinding back to my bag to get the distances. But that pretty much wraps up what I have as far as flight demonstrations. Talking about it a little more, I would say that the Simon line time lapse is everything that MVP players have been waiting for. Any fan of Simon has been waiting for, especially after he left Discmania and was unable to throw the PD2 Destroyer-esque discs that he was made famous for throwing. This is a marketing strategy like no other to give Simon Lizotte, the people's champion, everybody's favorite, whether they want to admit it or not, the first ever 12-speed disc that everyone's been wanting. Everybody likes a Destroyer. Everybody wants this mold in some way, shape, or form in their bag. So to attach Simon's name to that and have a whole line of discs that he can start marketing on his YouTube channel, this is going to be a very successful endeavor for them, and not without purpose. Like, this is a good disc. Like, they are giving him actually the molds people are after, and they are performing well. They made him Axiom instead of MVP, so they get the swirly rims. They're letting him work with them as opposed to for them to design the disc and the mold and the stamps and everything. You can look on Simon's channel if you want a little more in-depth look at that. So will it replace the Warbird in my bag? Obviously not. I am a Ranger member for Team Lone Star, and the Warbird is in my bag for a reason. It has earned that spot. It is so reliable, and it is perfect for what I do with my game. But there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to see a Simon line time lapse. If I could talk, a Simon line time lapse in almost every amateur bag that you see out there. You'll probably see a lot of grip bags that are Simon line as well. This is going to be a very successful endeavor for MVP, and we are going to see more and more to come. And as long as they keep performing to this level, they're going to make all the money in the world, and they're going to deserve it because they're giving the people what they want. I'm going to throw my Warbird. I'm going to hang this prototype Simon line up on the wall, but once the stock run comes out that's supposed to be a little more less stable and have a little bit more flip out of the box, comment, like the video, tell me if you want to see me play around with it, whether that be in the field or an actual scoring round against Logan, and we'll see what we can do. But in the meantime, this has been Bella's Bombers, and this is the first ever Bomber review, and we're going to give this disc a 10 out of 10. It is what it is. It is that Destroyer mold that we want MVP to have, and they delivered. It's going to beat into an absolute bomber, but in the meantime, it's going to be super controllable, super reliable, and all around just a great disc. This has been the review of the Simon line time lapse, and thank you for watching.